Hello, and this is my review of the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 6. Hello, welcome back to the interface. My name's Alex, and today we're going to look at the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now, this car was launched in the UK and Europe in late 2022, and it was then launched in the US in around 2023. Now, being part of the Hyundai group, which is also Kia and Genesis, this is basically the same car underneath as the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and also the Genesis GV60. So it shares a lot of its core technology with those vehicles, which means the 800-volt architecture for the battery, really rapid charging, impressive efficiency, but also a lot of the interior technology is quite similar as well, if not looking a little bit different, but underneath the skin it is pretty much the same. For the front design, the Ioniq 6 continues that retro pixelated theme that we're used to on Hyundai's electric vehicles now. So it's on the Insta, it's on the Kona, but it's on the Ioniq 9 and 5 as well. So we've got a little bit of pixeling in the headlight here, a lot of it on the top there as well. And we have got these few dots down there as well. There is a lot more of that theme that continues inside too. We also have a lot of clever design for the battery. So we've got these opening flaps here, which will open and close based on how often the battery needs to be cooled or heated, and that will allow some air in the system to help regulate its temperature. We've also got a very discreet front-facing camera, parking sensors, and then underneath here is the frunk. Now for the frunk, we actually have a really decent amount of space. So just open the latch on here, got nice gas struts, which most cars don't have anymore. And we've got a huge 45-litre bin in here, which is really good. So I have got the Type 2 charging cable bag, which fits nicely in there. So that's nice and secure, and it stops it from rattling around in the boot. Now this one has got more space than the all-wheel drive version, so we'll put on screen how much space that one does have. But because this one is a rear-wheel drive version, we do have a bit more space in the front. And really, this is the sweet spot of the range, I find. So we've got a really good amount of space. There are some sort of openings and you can get access to the 12-volt battery and the screen wash down here, but it's a really good addition. For the battery and charging, the Ioniq 6 has some impressive specs, much like the Ioniq 5. The charging socket is located at the rear right of the vehicle, which for Tesla V3 chargers is actually the wrong side. However, we do have an electronically opening door, and this one has AC and DC is up to 233 kilowatts, which is really impressive. And that means 10 to 80% in only 18 minutes, which is really good. AC on this one is 11 kilowatts, and that says 7 hours and 10 minutes from 0 to 100%. And there's only one battery option in the UK. Initially, this car launched with a smaller battery, but for the UK market, there is only one option, and it's 77.4 kilowatt hours. It's a really well-performing pack, and it offers really good range too. And also, thankfully, there's a heat pump on every single trim of the Ioniq 6. For the side profile of the Ioniq 6, it's very coupe-like in its design approach. It's a saloon, really, in terms of proportions and boot size, but it has got a very curvaceous roof, and this does impede on some of the headroom for the rear passengers, which we'll get to in a bit later. Door handles are really impressive on this one, so most cars now have these sort of flush door handles, and this implementation is actually quite nice. So at the moment they're unlocked in their state. If you press this little button here, they'll lock and go completely flush. And you'll notice this one has the cameras for the rear view mirrors, and they fold in slightly. They are quite large, but I would imagine they do help sort of with the co-drag efficiency of the vehicle and make it a little bit more efficient, which is quite nice. Colours are quite interesting on this one. There aren't many nice ones to choose from. They're all quite monotone. When this car initially launched, there was a really cool sort of electric blue colour, which is sadly no longer available. You can get it in either black, light blue, grey, white, dark blue, silver, metallic red, and then matte grey and matte gold. That matte gold is more of a sort of a champagne colour, not as in your face as you'd expect, but it is quite subtle. This one, it has one alloy option available on this ultimate trim, and they are 20 inches in design. This is the bit that people complain about the most on the Ioniq 6. There is quite a lot going on here, and it is quite fussy in terms of its design approach, but at the same time it does look quite funky and futuristic. Now personally, I quite like the way this looks. There is, again, quite a lot going on here, but it does all work quite well. So we've got this spoiler here with a lot of the pixel design as well. Got this little ducktail spoiler as well, and then we've got the massive rear light bar, again with the pixel branding. Now, The glass here doesn't have a rear wiper, which might upset quite a few people. Now, most saloons don't tend to have rear wipers, but the spoiler does seem to protect this section as well. Now, we have got the Hyundai branding here. We've also got the Ioniq 6 branding as well, sort of hidden behind the glass. And then we've got the rear camera and then the button to open the boot. Got the big black diffuser down here as well. There is a tow bar option you can get on this car, and this car can tow up to 1,500 kilograms on a braked trailer. Now, if we press this button here, we do get 401 litres of boot space with the seats folded up. Now, being a saloon car, the opening is quite restricted in terms of what you can get in there, and so is the opening in the back section of the boot as well. If we want to fold down the rear seats, we can do putting these buttons here. So we pull those, we can go inside and have a quick look as well. So once you fold those seats down, we get a little opening at the back there, and that reveals 706 litres. Now, if we look underneath the false floor here, there isn't much space at all, so we've got a lot of the battery system there and some sound denting. There's a little bit of polystyrene holding the granny cable, the granny charger 3-pin for the car, and also the tyre mobility kit. So it's all pretty good there. You are going to have to decide on whether this boot is good enough for you in terms of what you carry and things. And it is does go quite a long way back, so you can get suitcases and things, but the opening does restrict you in terms of what you can carry. Again, just press this button and that lowers the boot lid down. For the front, the Ioniq 6 has a really modern, airy feel to it, which is really nice and refreshing. There's lots of really good quality materials everywhere, so this whole centre section has an almost recycled feel to it, especially with this rougher material for the inboard window controls. Just like other Hyundai and Kia models, we do have the sort of iconic two big screens here. One for the infotainment, which is all touchscreen based, and then one for the driver. If you've driven any Hyundai vehicles before or any Kia vehicles, you'll know exactly how this system works. It's all digital, you can customize the theme, and it works incredibly well. And there's lots of sort of nice, unique Hyundai features to it. So you've got the blind spot cameras, you've also got information about what mode the wipers are in, which is quite a big bugbear of mine, not knowing if the wipers are actually in auto or not. Now, one important thing to mention with the Ioniq 6 is there are no optional extras. Everything seems to come as standard. You either pick the Ultimate or the Premium trim. Now, this one has one option on it, and it is the digital side view cameras, and they are £995. Now, in my testing and all the hundreds of miles I've done this week, I don't feel they're worth the money that you'd pay for them. And also, at night time, they tend to get a little bit of glare, and if it has been raining, if there's one little water droplet on the camera lens, it can sort of distort the view, especially if it's nighttime with all the bright headlights at the moment. So personally, if I was speccing an Ioniq 6, I wouldn't actually choose the digital side cameras, but as a party piece and as a technical achievement, they are quite cool. The mirrors themselves are quite large. Something like the Honda E, for example, managed to make them a lot smaller, and also it didn't have so much of this problem at nighttime, but it is cool nonetheless. So this one has the light grey seats. There is also a black version to choose from, and either one of those options is a no-cost option, which is really nice. So we have got a very dark grey steering wheel, which is nice as well. Light grey seats, which are ventilated. Sort of light grey on the centre console here. It's a bit more interesting than just having black, I find. And we've got a dark grey inside section as well. Now, one weird thing with the Ioniq 6 that probably goes back to old cars from the 70s is all the window controls are inboard, and that means that the door cards can be a little bit slimmer, but also they are nice and clean in their design. So we have got sort of a tray here to store various items like a Kit Kat or something, but we have got all the controls in the middle, which means the passenger can control all the windows if they want to, which is really quite ergonomic and makes a lot of sense. So we've got all the window controls, the lock and unlock buttons, auto hold, and then you can disable the windows in the back if you want to as well. Nice big tray underneath the section here, so I can store all my camera equipment in there if I want to. Got a wireless phone charging pad, USB-A for that one. Now, one unfortunate thing is that the Ioniq 6 doesn't have wireless Apple CarPlay or wireless Android Auto, despite other of its related vehicles, so the Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV9 having wireless CarPlay. I'm hoping at some point that Hyundai will be able to add that feature on via an update, but at the moment, as of recording in February 2025, this car doesn't have wireless CarPlay, which is a bit of a downside, unfortunately. Underneath the center console, there are two USB-C ports, both of which deliver power, and there are also two in the back too. These cup holders are a decent size, and we also do have some grippy things to keep them in place. but overall, it's in terms of the usability, it's actually quite nice. Now, one thing this group of vehicles does really, really well is the climate control. Lots of cars, unfortunately, now that I review, have all the climate control systems on the infotainment screen, which is A, dangerous, and B, just a bit fussy. It's just a bit annoying to use. Now, we have got all the climate control is exposed on this center console bit here. So we've got the recirculation, all the fan speed, the temperature, and there's lots of physical buttons for the volume. We've actually got a volume knob, which is a really rare thing to see. There is also the iconic 4 pixels on the steering wheel. Now, when the car is charging, each pixel represents 25% charge, so 25, 50, 75, and so on. If you knock the car into reverse, these will sort of flash purple, and then if you're in drive, they just sort of glow white and whatever color. It doesn't sound that useful, but it is quite fun, and it makes the cabin a bit more interesting to be in and adds a little bit of flair to the interior. And then lastly, we have a heads-up display which gives you all sorts of information such as your current speed, the speed cameras, and also what media it is playing too. So overall, it's really, really good. For the back seats, the Ioniq 6 has a really impressive amount of space. As you can see, I've got loads and loads and loads of room back here for my legs, and this seat is set up for my driving position. If you are taller than me, which statistically speaking, you probably are, you're going to have a bit of problem for the headroom here. I've spoken to some people who have sat in this vehicle that are taller than me, and they do have a little bit of a problem here for headroom, but for me, it's not that much of a problem. It's actually fine. Elsewhere, being a bespoke EV, we have a completely flat floor back here with one long continuous floor mat, which is quite nice for the central passenger. We also have 2 USB-C charging ports, which is really good, and a little sort of holder for a phone. Now, being the ultimate trim, this car actually has the sunroof, which brings in some light into the cabin, but it is sadly only at the front section. Like the Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y, it would have been nice to see one long continuous panoramic roof. In the middle, we also have a armrest with 2 decent-sized cup holders, complete with the pixel sort of pattern that Hyundai is known for. For the door card section, we've got a really good sense of quality as well, much like the front. It's got the ribbed plastic material with a bit of ambient lighting, electronically opening windows, 2-stage heated seats, and a good sense of quality on the speaker grills. We have also got a little bottle holder as well. Up here, we have got a nice modern diffused light, which we can turn on and off, and it adds a nice sense of quality to the interior. So what's the Hyundai Ioniq 6 actually like to drive? Well, in a few short words, it's very calm, relaxing, efficient, and comfortable. The driving experience is really, really nice and really positive, and just very relaxing. It puts you in a very nice, calm mood. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that this is related in quite a few ways to the EV6, the EV9, the Genesis GV60, and all those other cars from the group. And this feels very similar. So the tech makeup, as I said earlier, has got the screens are very similar. Everything in here is very easy to understand if you've driven a car from the 3 brands before, especially the EV ones. The Ioniq 6 itself, it sits a lot lower than those other cars. There's not so much headroom, as I mentioned earlier too. The things that are important, so we've got a very similar regen setup to those other vehicles. We've got a very similar, as I said, a very similar screen setup as well. It's all very familiar, but all very easy to use, again, if you've driven any vehicles from those brands before. One thing that this group does really well is the regen setup. So we've got some actual paddles on the steering wheel column here, and we can dance around the regen basically. So we've got left is increasing the regen, and on the right we basically are reducing the amount of regen we've got. So if we increase here, we basically increase our amount of coasting, and the car is sort of freewheeling at the moment. And if we increase it here, so up to level max, basically level 4, we've got really quite strong regen. So it's basically bringing me to a complete stop here, which is really quite handy, especially in traffic in the cities and stuff. It's really, really quite useful. Now, dynamically, the Ioniq 6 is definitely a bit more relaxed in its approach to handling. There is supposed to be a Ioniq 6N coming at some point, which will be very similar to the quite well-regarded Ioniq 5. But this one, in the standard rear-wheel drive sort of ultimate trim, it feels very relaxing, very calm, puts you in quite a nice calm mood when you're driving and just chilling around town and cities. It's quite easy to drive. It's quite nice. Now, being a modern car, the Ioniq 6 does have its fair share of audible alerts and warning tones. For example, every time you enter a new speed limit zone, you'll get a little bing to tell you you've done so. Also, if you happen to stray 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, you'll get another audible tone, which won't turn itself off for a little while. Thankfully, with a recent software update, the group of cars under the Hyundai Group umbrella, you can now disable those alert tones by holding down the mute button, which is a really good sort of advancement in software. And that's as of November 2024, and you can do that, which is really good. For example, that system is quite helpful in the Ioniq 6 because sometimes it will make a mistake and read a speed limit which isn't relevant to the road it's actually on. For example, you might leave a motorway services and it might have picked up a 5 or 10 mile an hour speed limit that's on the motorway services, but it hasn't registered that it's changed when going back on the motorway. So having the ability to mute those alerts is quite handy, especially while moving. Obviously, you can disable those in the infotainment screen. It's fairly easy to find just to turn off some of the annoying stuff on this car. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Ioniq 6 isn't really geared towards sporty driving. It's more of a relaxing motorway cruiser really, and quite a nice comfy sort of lounge experience. But we do have 3 different driving modes: Eco, Normal and Sport. If we knock it into Sport mode, the steering's a little bit more weighted, we get a bit more feel from the throttle pedal. Let's see how we get on in these corners here. Definitely more flat through the corners, so if I knock it back into Eco, it's going to be a bit more boating, the steering's definitely more delayed, which is quite nice when you're sort of just cruising around. Now, as I mentioned, the Ioniq 6 has 2 different motors to choose from. One has around 224 brake horsepower and one has around 300 brake horsepower. Now, this is the less powerful of the 2, but it does give you a bit more range than the all-drive option. It does around 0 to 60 in 7 seconds, and acceleration is actually quite brisk. So I'm just going to come to a complete stop here and completely floor it. There we go. So do 0 to 50 because it's a 50 mile an hour road. And there's 50 there. Pretty quick, doesn't knock you back in your seat like Teslas and stuff, but it is more than enough power for what we are doing today. So I'm going to knock it back in Eco. There we go, the range has increased slightly. So lastly, I'll just mention the efficiency on the Ioniq 6. The whole group of cars, again, is really renowned for their efficiency and charging speed. But if we have a look here, so over the last 19 hours of driving and around 780 miles, I've achieved 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour. Now, what's important to remember is in the last few days, it's been quite cold. It's been as low as 2 degrees and as high as 7 degrees. So in that regard, the Ioniq 6 has actually performed quite well. But right now, for example, I'm doing 40 miles per hour and it's achieving around 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So that's pretty good. So overall, what do I think about the Hyundai Ioniq 6? Well, like the other E-GMP cars, so the Genesis, Hyundai and Kia cars, there's a lot to like about the way that this company implements technology and all the EV charging bits. It's really, really well done, and there's not much to find wrong. However, some people, some taller people than me, might find the Ioniq 6 a little bit cramped, especially in the back and the front. It's a little bit lacking on headroom, but luckily I'm not really that tall. And also the boot, for larger families, the opening isn't as large as people are used to in SUVs. So for those people, the Ioniq 5 or the Kia EV6 might be a better choice. But the styling on the Ioniq 6 is probably one of its highlights for me anyway. I know that it's not that good for everyone, but it is a really, really good looking car, I find. But I'd love to know what you think in the comments down below. My name's Alex. Please consider subscribing to the Interface Cars, and I'll see you again in the next video.